Good Wednesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. So the waiver claim process kind of ironed itself out in the NFL. The Browns did put in a claim. Wasn't a wide receiver, wasn't a defensive tackle, was not even a tight end. The Browns claimed quarterback Kellen Mond on waivers from the Minnesota Vikings. Since he was claimed on waivers, he has to be part of the 53-man roster. That means they had to get rid of somebody from the 53-man roster, and they decided to release Isaac Rochelle. Rochelle, social media guy, says he's highly disappointed, doesn't know how this will play out, but he will show his gratitude for all the coaches at the Browns. Browns are interested in bringing him back to the practice squad. He also has other interest among the teams that are interested in, reportedly the Eagles, who saw him in those joint practices. All right, let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. I guess I thought a young quarterback was possible, Jeff. I thought a wide receiver or a tight end or a defensive tackle probably made more sense.
I think that was probably the thinking from everybody. Kellen Mond, coming from Minnesota, so it's not like he was there while Coach Stefanski was there, that they have a relationship. But obviously somebody maybe they wanted to get a look at. I mean, you're always looking at every possibility for your roster. Maybe he is somebody they feel that could be a long-term number 2 to Deshaun Watson. Maybe he's somebody they just want to get a look at for the next week or so. I mean, he could end up, getting released, and then maybe you try to stash him after week 1 on your practice squad. There's something there, 6'3", 219 pounds. He's got a decent arm. He was pretty productive at Texas A&M, showed well at the Senior Bowl in his time down there. I think we all get so accustomed to these are what the needs look like. And we've gone through this for years. Defensive tackle looked like a need, and it's looked like a need for years. We talked about this just the other day. Wide receiver, I think there's probably guys they're interested in. But the other thing is getting anybody in here now, is that going to be having anybody immediately ready to contribute against Carolina? That's probably not the case. You brought back 2 wide receivers to the practice squad. These are guys that are familiar with your offense. They know your offense. The dust isn't settled here. And for Isaac Rochelle, we actually recorded this morning. We really thought on that final 53, 6 defensive ends felt like an odd number where somebody was going to maybe be in trouble. What it tells me is that maybe Chase Winovich is closer to returning than we were aware of. Missed all the preseason games. He brings one thing in that room that nobody else does. Everybody else kind of built the same: 6'4", 6'5", 275, 280. Winovich a little bit of smaller, just a straight kind of speed rusher. Similar to what they had last year with Tack McKinley. They were invested enough to trade, a player for him and Mack Wilson in the offseason. I think they want to see what they have in Chase Winovich. For Isaac Rochelle, of course, all eyes are getting to a NFL 53. But it's not terrible to have a home waiting for you, with the Cleveland Browns, who, if you were on the practice squad, could get called up at any time with a veteran who had a strong summer. And I'm not surprised some other teams might be interested in bringing in Isaac Rochelle.
All right. Also today, we found out the Bengals hosting O.J. Howard. He was basically on the list of the guys the Browns were interested in. He is a guy with 4 years or more service time, so he became a free agent, didn't have to go through waivers. If all goes well with his physical, he is expected to sign with the Bengals. So, again, Howard, a guy that was intriguing, just former first-round pick, pretty impressive pedigree from Alabama. For whatever reason, after the first 2 years in Tampa Bay has kind of declined. You can see why the Browns were interested, but it looks like he's looking at other places as well.
Well, O.J. Howard, there's been a lot of injury history the last few years, and it's certainly depleted his game. When he came to the NFL, was very underutilized in his time at Alabama. So everybody felt once he got to the NFL, there would be more there. There would be more opportunities for him to make some plays. And early he did. His rookie year, he had 6 touchdowns before he got injured. Now coming off an Achilles, which we all know is a difficult injury to come off of. I do wonder, though, if this is one where maybe the Browns having Deshaun Watson suspended for the first 11 games maybe hurt them. Because if there was a possibility here that he took a phone call from the Bengals, took a phone call from the Browns, and said, oh, well, it's Deshaun Watson or it's Joe Burrow. That's not a bad spot to be in. For the Browns, it's Jacoby Brissett. You're kind of blocked by David Njoku. You look at the Bengals situation, it is Joe Burrow. They don't have necessarily a ton. Hayden Hurst is, a pretty good tight end, but not a great tight end. I think it's just probably came down to a case where probably a better opportunity for O.J. Howard with the Bengals. And I'm sure the allure of Joe Burrow over Jacoby Brissett or Josh Dobbs, was something, that you couldn't really turn down in a scenario where it's basically a prove-it deal. You're trying to maybe put up some good numbers, get yourself another contract for next season somewhere. But I think for the Browns, this was going to be a difficult one with the Bengals having interest and the Bengals being able to, let O.J. Howard know that we have a top shelf quarterback ready to go, and he will be available for us for the first 11 games.
All right, the Browns did sign some folks to the practice squad. We'll take a look at some of the names that have, in fact, come back. Dalen Baldwin back on the practice squad. Came in late. The Browns brought him in late in camp, and he played pretty well. They also did sign a couple of tight ends. Zaire Mitchell-Payton re-signs with them. Also, defensive tackle Roderick Perry re-signs with the Browns practice squad. Herb Miller, a cornerback who was a little bit intriguing, back on the practice squad. You mentioned a couple of wide receivers. Mike Harley, the second one as well, back on the practice squad. Cornerback Sean Jolly re-signs on the practice squad, as does the tight end Miller Forrestall. They also got John Kelly back, a running back on the practice squad. The one guy they did not get back was Blake Hance. The 49ers claimed him. Not a surprise, similar running scheme, and Hance showed some versatility when he was called on with the Browns.
Blake Hance obviously played left guard in a playoff game for this team. Last year played some left tackle, didn't play so well at left tackle. He actually played pretty well at right tackle. Always been a better run blocker than a pass blocker, just not really a big enough, heavy enough guy to sit and anchor to handle the pass rush. But for Blake Hance, what's the better path to playing time? He hadn't played, much here at all. You had Jack Conklin coming back. You had Jedrick Wills. There was an opening spot for him. And I think one of the things that, was difficult for Blake Hance was when they got down to the fact that they were now on their second string center as a starter, and now they needed a reserve center. Michael Dunn played there, showed well there. So that put, him in a spot where he was more favorable to the coaching staff because he could do a little bit more as a reserve offensive lineman. Blake Hance, not the worst thing in the world, though. You're going off to San Francisco, a team that competed in the NFC Championship game last year. So for him, it was the best. That'll always be a good, cool story. A guy named Blake and showed up basically out of nowhere, participated in one of the biggest Browns moments probably ever over the last 2 decades. So he moves on. The 2 wide receivers coming back, Dalen Mitchell, it's interesting. He caught everything that was thrown to him this summer. Bigger guy. We didn't really get to see him run the full route tree, but, every route he ran, he was able to produce into a first down. What's the key with playing the wide receiver position that we see, with the struggles of Anthony Schwartz is actually catching the ball. He was able to do that. Mike Harley, everybody kind of liked him over the summer at the University of Miami, undrafted free agent, brings some return ability, showed some things in his time, but it was a difficult spot. There were guys who made this roster who were drafted or were brought in by this regime. Those guys were going to have basically the hierarchy of the pecking order. But for the Browns, they get back 2 young guys that they were impressed with and wanted to work with a little bit more. Look, there's only 5 wide receivers on the 53, so anything can happen on any given Sunday as whether or not somebody's going to get a call up from the practice squad. So it's good for these guys, that they get to continue the opportunity. And, everybody talks about players moving, but it's really difficult because when you move on and you get claimed now, the practice time is not nearly in season as much as it is now. So it's a lot more put on the players as far as getting themselves ready, learning playbooks, learning offenses. So for these 2 young guys, that's one less hurdle they have to worry about. They can just go in every day, try and be comfortable and, make the most of any opportunity that's afforded to them.
So you mentioned, the five wide receivers on the 53, 6 if you count Felton, who's working there. 2 tight ends.
Felton's 5.5. He's the 5.5 wide receiver, the 4.5 running back.
So you got 4 running backs, you got 2 tight ends, you got 5.5 wide receivers. Is that, to me, it just seems like it's telling me they're going to play a little bit more Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, 2 running backs together. Am I reading too much into those numbers?
I wouldn't necessarily not think so. Because the first thing you look at right now is if it's 2 tight ends and there's no fullback on the roster, what are you doing on 3rd and 1? What are you doing on 1st and goal from the 3? You're going to put a second person in that backfield. My guess is it's Kareem Hunt. They'll get, what would you, in that circumstance, you'd run another offensive lineman on the field and run him as a tackle eligible. But the point is it maybe isn't so much about the positions right now as it is the players. You look at this and, there are some good offensive players, and we're going to find a way to get those guys onto the field. This team used a fullback for the last 2 years. Andy Janovich, Johnny Stanton didn't really do much. Who would you rather have on the field with an opportunity to make a play with the ball in their hands? Kareem Hunt, Dearness Johnson, any one of the wide receivers, any one of the tight ends. It was something they tried, and I think one of the reasons they were so interested in going after a player like Deshaun Watson is they felt they could make this next evolution and maybe spread things out a little more with Deshaun Watson. And look, it's about scoring points in the NFL nowadays, and scoring points don't usually equate to two running backs in the backfield, or certainly involving a fullback by any means whatsoever. Or you could just find some guy who plays slash linebacker, slash fullback, slash special teams, use him a couple of snaps on offense if you have to. But for the Browns, it's definitely moving to more similarities to what everybody else is doing, is whereas you're basically putting basketball on grass and just trying to find your best athletes and put the ball in their hands.
Well said. You're right. Don't get caught up in the positions. All right. So this is interesting. We've talked about it, and I know you're probably not buying this. Browns are said to have expressed an interest in defensive tackles around the NFL. And again, they keep bringing up Ndamukong Suh and Browns. We've heard forever that the Browns just aren't interested in Suh. Do you think they're interested in trying to bring in a veteran defensive tackle?
I would think they kind of have to be. I mean, these guys did not play very well over the summer. And we can keep hearing all the positivities you want to say about Jordan Elliott. I think Tommy Togiai, in my opinion, of the four defensive tackles, I think I saw the most promise with Tommy Togiai, his ability to absorb double teams, his ability to make some plays, whether it was at the line of scrimmage or, not giving up on a play and tracking a play once it got past him. It's not the greatest room right now, but this is a team that wants to play a lot of nickel and dime. They want to play a lot of pass rushers. There's a reason they have four defensive ends who are 6'4" or taller. They feel they have the ability to play these guys inside, on the inside when it comes down to those types of spots. If the right player is there, but I've been doing this, and this is my 6th year of Cleveland Browns coverage, and I've been saying for 6 years now that they're a little light on the defensive tackle room. And, maybe that's just the way I feel. It just doesn't seem to be something that truly comes to fruition with them. But all that being said, they do have, over the last 3 years, they have Jordan Elliott. They do have Tommy Togiai. They do have Perion Winfrey. They did spend a little bit of money on Taven Bryan this offseason. So it's not like they're not addressing it. They're just not addressing it, I think, as majorly as some of us who cover the team feel, and certainly as a lot of the fan base feels.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. A couple of sleeper picks. Also, surprise players on the 53-man roster. Sports4CLE will be right back talking Browns. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. We're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This viewer has a couple ideas for some guys that are under the radar who he thinks can be really good this year.
Hey, love the show. Just wanted to say, now that the 53-man roster is, set, well, for now, before they start picking up other guys off of the rosters, if they do. But I'm going to think DeAnthony Bell and Michael Woods, the receiver. Those are my two sleeper picks for the Browns this year. I think DeAnthony Bell showed something in the preseason games, and I think Michael Woods is just different. I think he's going to be good. Those are my two sleeper picks. Just want to hear what you guys think. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Jeff Lloyd, what about it? Woods back practicing, so that's a sign that he's getting healthy. That's been the question with him for the last couple of weeks.
With Michael Woods, that was a big question because, when everybody was out the first run we're talking about Anthony Schwartz, we're talking about David Bell, Michael Woods was a drafted young man. He was given the opportunity and showed well in some red zone work, showed well with Deshaun Watson. It was a difficult evaluation for Michael Woods coming out of college because the time in Arkansas, then jumped to his final year at Oklahoma. And, he got to Oklahoma, and normally when you make a transfer like that, unless you were, absolute elite star, it's hard to get all the reps. So he did split a lot of playing time at Oklahoma, but what you saw was pretty promising. Here's a guy thus far, they love what they see of him. And look, we know what we have at wide receiver 1, but I would say 2, 3, 4, 5. Even with Donovan Peoples-Jones in year 3, look, this is anybody's game. Anybody steps up of these other 4 wide receivers here and starts making some plays, they're going to find a way to basically, create some separation from themselves and the rest of that pack and getting more reps out on the field with Amari Cooper. Michael Woods, he's ready to go. And, he talks the talk, he acts it and goes out every day. Didn't get to see much. And that's the thing as far as, preseason games, it certainly hurt him. But now as he is, back on the practice field, and I think that was one thing when it came out yesterday that it was announced that he was making the 53, you kind of felt similar to Chase Winovich. Well, where exactly is he with health-wise? But, back out on the field now, which is important. The Anthony Bell, and this is what was even impressive, when he spoke today, speaking that, he was an older rookie coming into this. And he said, look, if I had gotten this opportunity a couple of years ago, maybe I would have mentally not been ready for it. You come in as a long shot. It's hard to convince yourself sometimes that you truly aren't just the long shot. But just, again, did everything. He forced 2 fumbles. The first thing you notice there is just a guy who's got, brains for the game. You see what Joe Woods has done over the last couple of years with safeties. MJ Stewart at times was the Browns' best safety last year. Joe Woods has a system that is built for safeties to succeed as long as you are an intelligent player and you're going to stick to what your role is. We've seen at times in the past Ronnie Harrison go astray and go off course, causing problems for this team. Richard LeCount, his rookie year led to questions about whether or not he was an accountable player. I think for Bell, it came down to him maybe versus Dakota Allen, who made the practice squad. As far as being a guy, can you kind of maybe lead the special teams? And this is a little bit of an advantage you're going to get with a rookie at 25 years old. But the Anthony Bell is ready to go. And, there's not a far glimpse from him being the 5th safety on the roster to being the 3rd safety on the roster. And if you are the 3rd safety, we know Joe Woods likes to play safeties. He likes to play 3 safeties a lot. So the opportunity for DeAnthony Bell is pretty close. And this is a guy, to his credit, came out of nowhere, a school nobody heard of, worked really hard, took to coaching, improved every day. And the Browns maybe, first time in a couple of years here, UDFA has made this team, but the Browns may have struck a little bit of gold here. And, every now and then when you have a great roster, you need some guys who are willing to put in the work. Some of those guys that are lunch pail types of players, and DeAnthony Bell is certainly that.
Yep, he likes to hit people, and you like that in your safeties, without question. This is from Pro Football Focus. Surprises to make the Browns' initial 53-man roster. They go with Demetric Felton. Hard to envision the Browns keeping 5 running backs. That's exactly what they did. Felton does have the ability to play out of the slot, return kicks, but there's an excess in the backfield, excess talent in the backfield of Cleveland right now. He was one of the first receivers mentioned, first slot receiver mentioned by X Van Pelt last week, and he's also the main punt returner. So I'm not surprised that he's on the 53 because he's the main punt guy. Do you think they look to upgrade that? Is there an upgrade in the return game anywhere foreseeable for the Browns?
Well, this is where it's difficult for the Browns because, look, you made a huge investment, at least you thought you did, in going out and bringing in Jakeem Grant. Jakeem Grant goes down, season's over, and this is certainly what's probably opened up the opportunity for Demetric Felton, certainly made his path to making the 53 a lot greater. But, I don't know what, these guys don't grow on trees. There's a little bit nowadays. I mean, it used to be back in the day, there were a lot of great return men. Now with the way, with the punting, the corner punting, and, so many kickers just blasting the ball through the end zone, return ability has kind of gone astray. It's just not something you really get to practice. There's not enough players who are really good enough at it. They're going to take a hit. They were certainly expecting, Jakeem Grant to, provide a spark there. But in the same respect, look, Demetri Felton's done this in the past. He was a pretty good returner in college. It's just a question of getting your feet back under you and doing it again. But I think for the Browns right now, with questions at tight end, with questions at wide receiver, maybe questions at defensive tackle, you might just have to live with the fact that, what you thought you were going to get as far as a plus, kick return guy or punt return guy is something you're just not going to have this year. And you're just going to have to deal with it.
Yep, and he started out, Felton that is, returned it pretty well, then had a game where he fumbled a couple times and just couldn't quite recover from that. That was last year. All right, Jack Duffin tweets this out. It's kind of interesting as well, a name to keep in mind. Would expect the Browns to take a look at Anthony Firkser. Formerly the Titans spent the offseason with the Falcons. You see the numbers. Could be a reliable 3 that from Jack Duffin, the Orange and Brown report. It's an interesting name. They did bring back 2 guys to the practice squad. So just your thoughts on maybe exploring that possibility.
He's one I mentioned today on my show that I thought, there was a possibility they were going to look into this, when it was understood that, O.J. Howard was most likely making other plans to go to Cincinnati. The 2 tight ends, bringing back Forrestal and Zaire, with the 2 of them, I honestly thought Nakia Griffin-Stewart had the stronger summer. But Nakia Griffin-Stewart's been around the league a lot. So, there's places he can go. I mean, he's been on 3-4 teams. So he's certainly got a lot of track record. And with a player like that, you probably got a lot of teams that have coaches that you're experience with. So probably just checking out for the best opportunity. Forrestal did play for the Browns last year, did play a lot for him. When he came in a lot of times as, the 3rd tight end when they were going through injuries with their other tight ends. But Firkser he'd be an interesting one. The only question would be is here's a guy who's going to come in with 111 career receptions, understanding he's not really going to probably see a lot of balls. So the question would be whether or not, that's going to be, something that he's going to run and jump to. But again, we're talking about transitions and changes. And, this Browns team, which was so tight end heavy in 20 and 21, yes, you still think David Njoku is going to make plays, but you think Harrison Bryant's going to make plays. But this team does not have nearly much invested in the position as they did in the 2 years under, Coach Stefanski, loaded at running back, hoping young receivers can make plays. I mean, better athletes, these are the ones who want the ball in their hands. So, definitely seeing a change in philosophy as far as roster construction from Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski.
This also from Pro Football Focus. So stock up, stack down after 2022 preseason. And this one, stock down. Anthony Schwartz led all receivers in preseason with 5 drops, catching 3 of 12 targets thrown his way. His targets this season generated a 4.9 passer rating in the preseason. So those are all numbers that are concerning. Again, Jeff, I've said, and I don't think you give up on him, but I don't think you want to count on him either.
Look, it's a tough spot to be in. And no team, it's rare that's going to happen with the guys that drafted their own players. They drafted Anthony Schwartz as a top 100 player. He did miss a lot of time last year with a severe concussion. He was in a pretty bad situation last year. The passing game was not good. It didn't matter who it was. Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins. None of these guys had success in the passing game last year. So it was kind of hard to truly gauge Anthony Schwartz there. Then you get him in here for year 2. You got Deshaun Watson. Oh, wait, no, you don't. Here's Jacoby Brissett. And you're talking about skill level, certainly down from Deshaun Watson. There should be a chance for Brissett and Schwartz to, click a little bit. If Jacoby can do one thing, he throws a pretty good deep ball. But if Anthony Schwartz, look, it's great that you can get open. It's great that you're running the routes. But the most important thing is catching the football. And, it's tale as old as time. You can't catch it. There's no sense throwing it to you. Anthony's going to get this year. But, I don't think, he's sitting there as safe as he would like to be, as comfortable as he would like to be. David Bell seems to catch everything. Michael Woods seems to catch everything, and a couple guys behind him on the practice squad who've had some success. For Anthony Schwartz, the time has got to be now, because otherwise he could just find himself ending up further and further down the depth chart in that room, and then that creates for a difficult situation. But the Browns are not going to give up on the speed aspect he can bring to this game yet. They just kind of really need it to come to fruition. And, for Anthony, kind of needs it too, because this could be a big spark that this offense is desperately going to need this first 11 games.
Jeff Lloyd from the Lockdown Browns podcast and I going to step aside, take another time out, another side of the break. Where do the Browns rank in terms of age in the 32 NFL franchises? We'll take a look at that. And who are their top playmakers? Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Lockdown Browns podcast. So this is from Spot Track, the oldest 53-man rosters in the NFL. And it's no surprise that you got a 45-year-old quarterback. You're going to have the average age skewed a little bit. Buccaneers are 1, Patriots 2, Saints 3, and then the youngest 3, the Cowboys, the Browns, and the Lions. Jeff, you look at that, Browns' second youngest roster in the NFL, and by most accounts, probably top 10 in terms of talent. What's that just say about what Andrew Berry and this front office have put together?
Well, part of this also, though, is having faith in what you've drafted. The Browns still have every draft choice on their roster that Andrew Berry has selected. So you're talking about a lot of players that are in their third year, their second year, or their first year. And some of this is even skewed because we know Joel Bitonio is no spring chicken. And Myles Garrett, this is year 6. Nick Chubb, this is year 5. Some of these guys are getting up there in NFL age. There's no question around it. But you've got to, basically what it is you pay for the stars, and then you try to go find, young, cheap guys who can play their roles. And if they develop, you then have the decision to whether or not you're going to extend them or you move on from them. But when you keep as many players as you've drafted, your roster should be young. It's just the way it goes. And it shows a lot of faith in what he's done here. I mean, you have a team like the Eagles who just dumped 2 players from the 21 draft class, a wide receiver and the 3rd round pick in less than an hour and a half. They moved on from 2 of those players. The Browns, that's why it is such a big thing when they look at prospects to draft. They look at age. They want to draft younger players. So they feel that you will get better with age, you will get better with NFL coaching, and they're going to get the best out of you for their time that you will be with the Browns.
Yeah, and you're by the time if you draft younger guys, by the time you get to the second contract, you're not on the downside of the age for the NFL as well.
No question. And you're getting a player, and the other thing is if you take a player who was a 4th, 5th round pick, he develops into a pretty good NFL player. The player might not want to leave the franchise he's with because this is the franchise that, took him from being a 4th, 5th, day 3 pick to a guy who is now a starter in the league. You understand what's best for you, who's looked out for you, where you've gotten to where you are. It's the smart approach. It's the right approach. It's why you just can't rush things. You're bringing in kids that are 20 years old, 21 years old. You understand there's some warts even mentally as much as there is with their game that they got to work out. They got to mature. You help them with that. And then hopefully, at the end of the day, everybody gets rewarded. You get a good player for a long, long time. Those young players who didn't make so much money when they were first drafted get nice extensions and, go on to good lives.
How about that? We're talking about the Browns with patience with draft picks. Who would have thought of that about 5?
It's a rarity.
4 or 5.
It's a rarity.
Yeah, I know. All right. Let's take a look at some of the Browns' playmakers on offense. I would think Nick Chubb has got to be considered the top playmaker. Who would you put behind him? In what order would you put playmakers behind Nick Chubb?
This is actually kind of funny. I got into this a little bit the other day with Adam the Bull. We were going back and forth on this. I think for me, it's got to be Amari Cooper. Number one, it's the receiving game. It's wide receiver one. There's so many times if you're a team and you're down, you're going to have to throw the ball to get back into it. I think Amari Cooper is just an extremely underrated wide receiver. And maybe a part of it is, his own doing, because you just don't hear much from the guy. He's not a talker. He is unlike most top receivers in the NFL, where his play does the speaking, not his mouth, which is rare again. And I think for Kareem Hunt, it's been tough because it's truly hard to gauge what Kareem Hunt totally is now. Is he still that almost 2,000-yard running back that he was with the Kansas City Chiefs? Because he's never getting that opportunity here with the Browns. The opportunities he gets, he looks good. Although he doesn't really get the big chunk plays, he's more just kind of like a hammer and nails type of guy. It's 4, it's 5, it's 8, it's 3, it's 4, it's 5. So I would probably put Kareem third. I think David Njoku bests out Donovan Peoples-Jones at this point, and he's going to have an opportunity here to really rise up, I think, David Njoku, because the Browns are going to be really smart about the situations they get him into. They understand he's too big, he's too fast. He's too big, he's too fast for most linebackers. Safeties, he's just too wide. You can't get around him. So if the ball's thrown correctly, it should be David Njoku, where it's going to be an incomplete pass. And then you're probably going to go with Donovan Peoples-Jones. If Donovan can start to put together some better reps, some more continued solid reps in shorter routes and able to produce with those reps, it allowed Donovan to grow. Right now, what you have is a good vertical receiver, but Donovan Peoples-Jones got to find a way to contribute a little bit more in the shorter intermediate passing game.
You mentioned Njoku, and is this the year we finally see them use the mismatch ability that he has? You kind of alluded to it, and I understand Hooper was there, but that's a guy that you watch and you're like, man, and I know he's got to catch the ball. That's been an issue. But you look at it and you're like, there's a lot to like about that guy.
Yeah, I think you're going to get to the situation this year, and it almost felt at times like David Njoku was open by accident because teams just felt they weren't going to throw him the ball. Then you get to that Charger game last year, and the Chargers basically did that. Look, we're going to cover everybody else. And he absolutely scorched him for like 7 and 140. He literally, he's built like a Greek god. He's got every athletic trait you could possibly want in the guy. Obviously, the Browns went into this committing to something essentially that they've never seen. They went in and paid David Njoku like he is a top 5 tight end in the NFL. They have never seen that type of production. I'm sure part of it was because they really like where he's gone with his blocking ability, but you're not going to pay tight ends north of $10 million for blocking ability. It's just not the way it works. You expect David Njoku is going to give you a return of 60 receptions, probably 750, 800 yards, 8 touchdowns. That's the monetary amount they slapped on David Njoku when they agreed to this contract extension. I certainly think he's capable of it. We'll see if Jacoby Brissett can help him get there with it. I also think there's something interesting the Browns can do with their tight ends. Look, Harrison Bryant's got wide receiver experience. So kind of does David Njoku. You could put them out wide. You could put the wide receivers in the slots. There's a lot of things you can do here to create mismatches and make sure that you're trying to get David Njoku on basically the team's worst defensive back. And I'm really looking forward for the Browns to get to that this year with David. It's been a long time coming for David. And it really, I think, kind of hurt him when there was the regime change, because 2019, he had missed so much time. He was injured. And, when the new regime kind of came in, they're like, look, we don't know much about you. You're this young kid. You're a great athlete. We don't even know if you can block. So basically he had to go in and basically reprove himself to the new organization. It certainly worked out for everybody involved. David became a more dedicated player, a more dedicated blocker. The receiving aspect of those opportunities picked up for him. Should be a big year for the Chief. And I think, I know for one that David Njoku is ready to, show the rest of the NFL that he is just not some athletic phenom, that he can actually play this position.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast and I are going to step aside, take one more timeout. Other side of the break, we'll take a look at what the Browns do with that $38.7 million they are under the cap. Plus, who is the team in the AFC that concerns you the most? Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. This is from Jack Duffin. So the Browns are expected to have about $38.7 million in cap space once practice squad and the injured reserve numbers are taken out. How important do you think that is, Jeff, in terms of rolling that over? You got a couple of big contracts that are hitting next year. Now, the cap's going to go up without question. The NFL is printing money, and they'll have sports wagering revenue streams that eventually come in. It's going to keep going up. But how important is it to roll that over? Because you've got a big jump in Watson's contract. You're going to have Ward hitting. Some of the extensions are going to hit.
Well, the thing is, you look at like teams like the Saints, what they have done. You can always go in and rework those deals. But Denzel Ward, that's going to be a brand new deal. You cannot go in and rework that deal just yet. You at least got to get a year under your belt with it before you start moving money around on said deal. But rolling that money over. And look, everybody thought, maybe Deshaun Watson would lead to some other players choosing the Cleveland Browns. I think the fact that it went so long until people knew what the suspension was for Deshaun Watson, that it led some players maybe astray from not coming to Cleveland. Next year, when you have more solid footing with Deshaun Watson, hopefully that he should be around all the time, you're going to want that money because you're going to most likely have players who are going to want to maybe come play with this quarterback, with this team. So rolling that money over, of course, is going to be handy. I mean, Kareem Hunt, that money will come off. Dearness Johnson, that money most likely will come off. And then there's other situations, the Jack Conklin situation at right tackle, but you're also going to get into the point where you're going to have Jedrick Wills going into year 4. So there's going to be conversations to be had with some of the players within the building. They've done a really, really smart job. Andrew Berry, he's been, basically covering his bases everywhere as far as, having draft picks, with the Watson trade notwithstanding, obviously now. But you put yourself in a position to be able to make a deal like that because you did draft well for a few years. And you always want that money left over because, you're going to want to go shopping every offseason. You want to go get a couple of shiny new toys. And who knows, maybe next year there is that defensive tackle that the Browns so desperately think could be the guy for them, make a difference for them, and you're going to have the coin to go ahead and do it.
When you look at the AFC North, and we still are, 10 days from the 12 days, whatever it is, from the Browns' first game. Who concerns you the most in that division this year?
I'll just speak on two here, but with different concerns. I think the Bengals, the question is going to be, were they that good or did they get that lucky? It doesn't matter. Either way, they still went to the Super Bowl. But the question is there enough there on the defensive side of the ball? You go back to that Chiefs game in the playoffs, the Chiefs basically just, played around and cost themselves 3 points right before halftime. It turns out 3 points that they absolutely desperately needed, and that game would have never gone on as far as it did. So you certainly look at it that way. The moves they make on the offensive line, are they going to be enough to keep Joe Burrow clean? You cannot have that guy get hit like he's been getting hit in his time in Cincinnati. And the other one is Baltimore. Baltimore, for me, it's just different because it just seems without Lamar Jackson being taken care of financially long-term. And it's crazy to say that Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield right now are in the same position as far as their NFL contract. It's just bizarre. We're talking about a former NFL MVP here. It just seems really strange to me that that's not handled yet. And if it's not handled by the time the regular season starts, which is the deadline Lamar Jackson has said, you just wonder how that team is going to function. I mean, when you're a team and you have a former MVP at the quarterback, I think the last thing anybody's concerned about is whether or not the MVP is going to stick around, or whether or not the MVP is taken care of financially. But yet it is the case for the Ravens. They did some nice things. You get a lot of guys back off of injury. But I think with that unknown of Lamar Jackson, it certainly for me raises some questions about how good that team could possibly be.
It will be interesting to see how that unfolds. All right. How do the Browns get to Week 13 when Deshaun Watson can come back and play quarterback and still be in the playoff hunt? What's the recipe for success, if you will, with Jacoby Brissett?
This team has to start hot, because what it is regardless, you're going to have people who maybe are not going to say it within that locker room, but in the back of their minds are saying, man, how are we going to stay competitive? How can we stay around 500 for 11 weeks when we're supposed to have Deshaun Watson as our quarterback and we don't? First 4 games. Come on, the Carolina Panthers, the Jets, the Steelers, and the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, these are all winnable games. These are all winnable games if you had Baker Mayfield playing at the level he played last year at. You've got to go out. And number one, what you got to show is that there is no more nonsense or BS that goes on with this team anymore. This team is a focused team. You think you have eliminated all the distractions off of this roster. Now you have players like Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb, and Joe Bitonio. These are the glue of this team. True pros. They're going to get into situations and they're going to do everything they can to get out of them. They're going to play hard. It's going to be hard to lean on the defense for 11 weeks. It's really difficult to do that at any sport, at any level, because, other teams are good. That's why they get paid. So there's going to be weeks where somebody's maybe got the Browns defense's number. But Jacoby Brissett and 1.2 career interception percentage, Aaron Rodgers 1.3 career interception percentage. He does not make mistakes. But in the same respect, there's going to be times where he's going to have to make some plays. Amari Cooper, he's got him. David Njoku, the running backs. But David Bell, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Anthony Schwartz, Michael Woods, you got to find something else there with some of these young guys. They got to find a way to contribute. And again, you don't put this all on Jacoby Brissett, but you understand Jacoby Brissett is got to basically navigate this. And when it's time for a play to be made, he's going to have to do it. But you can get past those first 4, find a way to steal 2 of the next 7. If you can get to 6-5, 5-6, you feel a whole lot better about your position when Deshaun Watson comes back into that building.
Agreed wholeheartedly. Jeff Lloyd, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Really good stuff, Jeff. Thanks very much.
John, thanks so much for having me. Have a great day.
All right, Jeff Lloyd, make sure you catch him, host of the Locked on Browns podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan. We will continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. This is from ESPN.com, predicting potential 2022 surprises for each and every NFL team. And for the Browns, Myles Garrett wins Defensive Player of the Year. And they go on to say the mentality of the Browns defense at the moment is it has to hold down the fort for the first few months of the season, and it's ready to do so. Garrett is the star of that side of the ball. Feels like a Defensive Player of the Year run for him is just about overdue. Let's welcome in Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan. Spencer, I think if Myles Garrett can stay healthy, that's might be the kind of year you're looking at.
Yeah, I love this prediction by ESPN personally, because this really is the one thing missing for Myles Garrett in terms of, telling the story or on his resume of his dominance in this league and what type of player he is. You always get these rankings between him and people debate him versus T.J. Watt and if who's better. And Browns fans obviously get upset when T.J. Watt is higher ranked. You can kind of look and say, well, that's the thing that, T.J. Watt has. He set that single-season sack record last year. If Myles Garrett can have a season like that, if he can get up there close to the record or at least lead the league in sacks, I think he's definitely a shoo-in to get this award, and I would love to see it happen for him. We know how great of a player he is. I think he's definitely respected around the league enough in terms of how dominant of a player that he is. But for him to get to that next step and show the legend or the dominant guy he is to everybody, this would go a long way in doing that for sure. And I also just think it would be the Browns defense is going to be a key to the season. We know that. So if he has a season like that, Defensive Player of the Year, and he's a big reason why the Browns are maybe able to stay afloat and, keep the door open for the playoffs by the time Deshaun Watson gets back, then I think he'll certainly he'll make his case for the award by the time the season ends.
And I love the mindset that he has, when asked, who he would rank as the number one player in the NFL, he said, if I was voting, it'd be me. That's exactly what I want to hear from one of my defensive players. All right, we both agree defense they're gonna have to play well. Who not named Myles Garrett do you think is a key this year?
It's a great question, and I do think as a whole the secondary is going to have to play well. Obviously, that starts with Denzel Ward, but expecting big things from Greg Newsome in year two. Greedy Williams, who, let's face it, he might not be on the Browns next year. He's in a contract year because they just might not be able to pay him addition by subtraction. So expecting that trio of cornerbacks to really be able to lock things down in the defensive, the back end of the defense. And I think listen, if you want to talk about the weaknesses on this defense, and I think defensive line is one of those things, they'll at least get pressure with Garrett and Clowney. And, you have that great secondary on the back end that can kind of take care of things back there. That is the recipe for having a great defense throughout the season. So I think despite maybe some of the questions along the defensive front, they're going to be okay because of that. I also think JOK in year two is a guy that I really am going to be watching because we know the Browns linebackers they haven't had the greatest linebacking core in recent years, but I have high hopes for him. He's a guy that can play sideline to sideline, do some things in coverage. He looked pretty good in the games he played in the preseason, flying up and being instinctual, making plays. So he's another guy that I think has to have a good season, especially knowing, like I just alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, if you don't feel as confident in the interior of the defensive line, that's where a guy like JOK can really step up and be the guy making plays as if a guy breaks through and gets to that second level. So those are just some of the names. But, yeah, you're 100% right about this defense as a whole, David, because, I mean, man, like we all kind of knew going in that there was going to be some growing pains, a lot of new faces, a lot of changes on that side of the ball. But now this year, they got to be off and running. Like they don't have time to kind of feel things out and hope that they get it together late in the year. They got to come out of the gate really being the strong suit of this team to kind of carry the workload as Jacoby Brissett starts for 11 games.
Yeah, and they played well at the end of last year. They need to pick right back up. So you mentioned a lot of those guys are back from a year ago. It's almost flipped. Last year there was like 8 or 9 new guys. Now you got 8 or 9 returning guys. Do you think this defense looks the same, or does Joe Woods get a little more exotic and start throwing a little bit more pressure and a little bit more trying to turn the heat up and dictate tempo?
I hope so, right? I mean, that was definitely a problem last year. I think, especially early on, there was a lot of questions about why isn't he blitzing more? Why isn't he doing this more? You have some guys that could certainly do that, and I think part of that comes from he probably felt pretty confident in the guys he had up front last year. You have a Myles Garrett, you have a Jadeveon Clowney, and I do understand in a lot of ways like the recipe for sometimes beating some of these great quarterbacks, your Tom Brady's, your Aaron Rodgers, is being able just to get pressure with your front four, and then everybody else can kind of drop into coverage and take away options for you downfield. So I understand that that's a great strategy. That's kind of a way that you can beat a lot of these great quarterbacks. But at the same time, you got to be able to mix in the blitzes where it's appropriate and make something happen. Especially, again, knowing that there might have some weaknesses up front in the middle of that defensive line. You might have to call on some of those guys in the line to fly up and make some plays. So, I'm 100% right there with you. I'm also interested to see, because there was a point last season where Joe Woods had some quote about, I'm starting to realize that my secondary guys play better in man-to-man coverage, or his corners play better in man-to-man coverage. And I was sitting there thinking, like, you have Denzel Ward on your roster? Like, how does it take you to this point in the season not to know that these guys are great in man-to-man? So I'm wondering how much he mixes that in versus zone. And those are definitely two elements I'm looking at as we start this season.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see, and I hope he goes and gets a little crazy with that defense, because they have playmakers at all 3 levels. Turn them loose, let them go, and let's see how much damage they can inflict. Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we dive into the Baker Mayfield comment and some reaction to it. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan. We're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the comments Baker Mayfield made relative to beating the Browns bleep.
Yes, hello. Yesterday I heard you talk about, mention a little bit about the comment that Baker Mayfield made, this week. And I have a little bit of different take on it. My take is, so what? I mean, when he was here, we talked a lot of crap about him. When he left, we talked a lot of crap about him. So now when he says something back, all of a sudden we're the victims? Come on. This show also said a couple of weeks ago that the first 4 games of the regular season would be fairly easy. Well, Carolina is one of those first 4 games. You don't think that motivates them? You don't think they're licking their chops? If anybody should stop talking, it should be us. Us as the Browns organization and Browns fans. We have been a losing franchise for the last 25 years. We have been an embarrassment. We have no room to talk. That's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
There's one difference. I won't be taking a snap in that game, nor will anybody that's been on this show. So, Spencer, as long as Baker Mayfield says something about the Browns, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, and I mean, frankly, I love the fact that we get this from Baker Mayfield 2 weeks out from the game even starts, because this just adds some juice to the – we already knew that was going to be there artificially, just because you think the narratives that get spun with it, revenge game for Baker Mayfield, his former team, kicked him to the curb so that they could go get Deshaun Watson, all that comes with it's obviously going to be talked about. But then you get him being his unapologetic self. I mean, this is who Baker is. And you get a comment like this, and it just adds just a little bit of spice to the game leading into it. So for me, being a radio show host, this is what gets me up in the morning. This is what gets me, gives me some nice topics to talk about when I'm on the air. So I love it. I'll wrap with this. I can't wait for, because listen, the Panthers might win this game and Baker might ball out. He might have a great game. We know how he performs when he's, chip on his shoulder, back against the wall. That's always his MO. So he might come out and play one of the best games of his career just because he's highly motivated. But what I can't wait to see that happen if it does. And then just he goes back to being the Baker Mayfield we know, and everyone, all these people are cheering for the Panthers, supporting Baker, the outsiders that aren't Browns fans because they're upset with what the Browns did and the decisions they made this offseason. So it's just going to be funny to hear like all this support for Baker and Baker be, chip on your shoulder Baker for one week, and then he just reverts back to the guy that, frankly, we know who he is here in Cleveland, because he had those moments, but there was more moments where he wasn't living up to the billing of a first overall pick. So, I'm here for it. I'm excited for that matchup already.
The key distinction, though, is what the media says or what shows like this say are very different than what a guy playing in the game says. And that's the distinction that the caller is failing to see. All right, Myles Garrett said this, which was kind of interesting. This from Mary Kay Cabot tweet. We've known that type of demeanor, that attitude, and for better or for worse, it works for him. I'm not mad at him using that fire and that chip on his shoulder to help him play to that level that he has. He's been successful in what he's done. That is from a conversation with Mary Kay Cabot after practice yesterday. Mary Kay also tweets this. Baker Mayfield said, "That's not how I phrased it. That's not even what I said." That was from a little earlier today. But again, the Browns players aren't going to say anything. Baker was trying not to say anything. Whether he did or not, who knows? But it's just interesting. What do you expect from week one? The Panthers-Browns matchup, because of the whole the guy that was your first overall pick is coming back to play the team that kind of turned its back on him. It's intriguing. What do you expect from that matchup?
From the Baker side of it, I don't blame him for using, the everything that transpired this offseason as motivation. I also can't blame if they're going to go with the side of the story that was told yesterday that he said these things, and they're going to use that as motivation. Kevin Stefanski's never really been one to publicize any of that stuff that they're maybe, bringing up in the locker room or talking about to use as motivation. But we know that these teams and these players see that stuff, hear that stuff, talk about it. So I'm sure it'll be motivation for them as well. Listen, Dave, I've gone as far as to say that I think in some ways, and I'm not usually on this boat because it's week one of the season, that in some ways week one is a must win, just because I think if you lose that game, the emotions of the fan base are going to be just this groundswell of people who just think the sky is falling, season's over already. I think inside the locker room, and maybe they're not looking at it exactly like I am, but you're looking at the season in almost two parts, right? It's Jacoby Brissett part one for 11 games, and then Deshaun Watson for the final 6. And I'm trying to think, in that first 4 games, you need to get as many wins as possible with Jacoby Brissett, because the schedule after that gets a little tougher. And I don't know how many wins I can count on with Jacoby under center after those first 4. So I'm trying to figure out where I get those wins and scatter them. If you don't win as many as the first 4 as possible, I think Pittsburgh is a toss-up in that first 4 because it's a division game and they're always going to play you tough. So to me, I think it's a must-win in terms of this team setting themselves up to be a playoff contender. Doing that, that speaks to how I feel about this game, and I think just the meaning behind it. Obviously, there's the ancillary stuff with the relationship that was between Baker and the team, but also I just think the meaning of this game for the Browns season and how it's going to play out, I think, is also there as well.
Yeah, after those first 4, the schedule gets a whole lot tougher. So, yeah, and again, Panthers were not a good team last year. They've obviously improved some, but it's a game the Browns probably need. As always, appreciate the time and the insight, Spencer. Thanks very much.
Anytime, Dave. Always appreciate it.
All right, Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan. Check him out. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow on Sports for CLE.